The moment someone disrespects you, a clock starts ticking. Not for them, for you. Because in the next 3 to 5 seconds, you will either respond from your programming or from your philosophy. And the difference between those two choices will determine not just how that interaction ends, but what kind of person you are becoming every single time it happens. Most people respond from their programming, and their programming was written by people who were just as lost as they are. There is a particular kind of pain that comes with disrespect that people rarely talk about honestly. It is not just the sting of the moment. It is the hours that follow, the replaying, the reconstructing, the internal monologue that keeps rewriting the scene, inserting the perfect response you didn't have in time, building the argument that would have silenced the room, that would have made them look small, that would have proved something. Proved what, exactly? That is the question you need to sit with. Because the need to prove something after disrespect is not confidence. It is the sound of an identity that is still waiting for external confirmation to feel real. And the Stoics saw this with a clarity that is almost uncomfortable to look at directly. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journals, the ones never meant to be read by anyone else, that he dealt with some of the most dishonest, manipulative, and ungrateful people imaginable on a daily basis. Senators who smiled at his face and undermined him in private, generals who took credit for his strategies, advisors who used proximity to power as a tool for personal gain. He did not pretend this was easy. He did not pretend he was above being affected, but he returned again and again to the same foundational question. Does this touch what is actually mine? Not my reputation, not how I am perceived in the room, not the story other people are telling about me. What is actually mine? And the answer, every time, was the same. Only my choices are mine. Only my judgments are mine. Only the quality of attention I bring to this moment is mine. Everything else is outside the walls. And what is outside the walls cannot breach them unless you open the gate yourself. Here is what the genius of Stoic philosophy actually looks like in the middle of a moment of disrespect. Not in theory, not in a book, in the room, with the person in front of you, with your pulse elevated and your jaw tight, and every conditioned instinct in your body screaming at you to fire back. The genius is not in what you say. The genius is in what you choose to make it mean, because here is the mechanism that almost no one understands about disrespect. The disrespect itself is neutral. It is a sequence of words or actions produced by another human being who is operating out of their own fear, insecurity, need for dominance, or simple unconsciousness. That is the raw event. The suffering does not come from the raw event. The suffering comes from the interpretation you layer on top of it, the meaning you assign, the story you construct in the seconds that follow. Epictetus called this the most important discipline a human being can develop, the discipline of the impression, the ability to pause between the event and your response to it and ask with genuine curiosity, what is actually happening here, and what does this require of me? That pause is not weakness. That pause is where freedom lives. Now let's get specific, because philosophy without application is just decoration. The first way Stoics destroy disrespect is by removing the audience from the equation entirely. When someone disrespects you in front of others, the immediate pull is toward the audience. You feel their eyes. You feel the social weight of the moment. You feel that if you don't respond strongly, they will conclude something about your value, your strength, your position. And that pull is the trap, because the moment you start performing for an audience, you have already handed the frame to the person who disrespected you. They set the stage. They chose the terms, and now you are a character in their production. The Stoic move is to collapse the audience entirely in your own mind, not in theirs, in yours. You ask yourself one question. If no one was watching this, would I still feel compelled to respond? And if the honest answer is no, then your compulsion is not about integrity. It is about image. And defending an image is one of the most exhausting and empty pursuits a human being can dedicate their energy to. Let the audience disappear inside your mind. Deal with what is actually in front of you. The second way Stoics destroy disrespect is by understanding the difference between insult and injury. Seneca addressed this directly with an observation that cuts through centuries with frightening precision. He argued that a wise man cannot be insulted, not because he is arrogant, not because he is above feeling, but because he understands that an insult only becomes real when it finds a wound that was already there. Think about this carefully. If someone calls you stupid, and you have absolute internal clarity about your own intelligence, the word lands like rain on stone. It slides off. There is nothing for it to attach to. But if somewhere inside you there is a voice that has questioned your intelligence, that has collected evidence across years that maybe you are not enough, maybe you are slower than others, maybe you do not deserve the seat at the table you are sitting in, then that word does not land on stone. It lands in an open cut, and the pain you feel is not entirely caused by them. It is the pain of that wound being touched. This is not a comfortable realization, but it is a necessary one, because it means that the real work of becoming someone who cannot be destroyed by disrespect is not external. It is internal. It is the slow, deliberate work of finding every open wound and closing it from the inside, not by denying it exists, but by examining it honestly and deciding, with full awareness, what you actually believe about yourself. The third way Stoics destroy disrespect is by seeing the person clearly instead of reacting to the performance. Every act of disrespect is a form of communication, and almost never is it communicating what it appears to be communicating on the surface. When someone diminishes you, they are broadcasting their own internal architecture. They are showing you the precise size of the container they are living inside. They are demonstrating, in real time, what they need in order to feel safe or significant. A person who is genuinely secure does not need to make you small to feel tall. This is not a metaphor. This is psychology. And once you see it this way, something shifts permanently in how disrespect lands for you. You stop seeing an attack. You start seeing a confession. And it is very difficult to feel deeply wounded by a confession. You can feel compassion. You can feel mild contempt. You can feel a cool, clear-eyed recognition of who you are dealing with. But the hot, destabilizing sting of feeling attacked by someone who has revealed themselves to be this small, that fades. The fourth way Stoics destroy disrespect is by choosing response over reaction every single time. These two words are separated by the entire distance between slavery and freedom. A reaction is automatic. It is the unexamined output of your conditioning. It is what happens when the event bypasses your judgment and goes directly to your behavior. It is fast, it is loud, and it almost always costs you more than it costs the other person. A response is chosen. It is what happens when you insert your own consciousness between the event and your behavior. It can be silence. It can be a single measured sentence. It can be walking away with complete disinterest. It can be addressing the disrespect directly, but from a place of such calm that the words carry an entirely different weight than they would if delivered in anger. The content of the response matters far less than the state from which it is delivered. Anger makes you readable. Anger makes you manageable. Anger tells the other person exactly where the button is, and exactly how hard to press it. Stillness makes you unreadable. Stillness makes you something other people do not know how to handle, because they came prepared for war and found a wall. The fifth way Stoics destroy disrespect is by refusing to make it a referendum on their identity. This is the deepest one, and it is the one that requires the most sustained work. When disrespect happens, the primitive brain immediately asks a survival question. Does this mean I am less than? Does this mean I do not belong? Does this mean they see something in me that confirms the fear I have about myself? And if your identity is built on unstable ground, if it is built on achievements that can be taken away, on titles that can be revoked, on the approval of people whose own foundations are shaking, then that question is genuinely threatening. But if your identity is anchored to something that cannot be touched by another person's behavior, if it is anchored to your values, your choices, the quality of attention you bring to your own life, then the question loses its teeth. Not because you are pretending the disrespect didn't happen, but because you have already answered the question they were trying to use as a weapon. You answered it in private, long before they opened their mouth. And that answer is not available for renegotiation based on what someone else decides to say about you on any given afternoon. There is a reason the Stoics kept returning to this territory across centuries and continents and wildly different life circumstances. Marcus Aurelius on a throne, Epictetus in chains, Seneca navigating the most corrupt court in Roman history. The external conditions could not have been more different, but the internal work was identical, because the threat was always the same. Not the emperor, not the master, not the scheming senator. The threat was always the untrained mind, meeting an uncomfortable event and generating suffering out of the interpretation. They were not trying to become people who felt nothing. They were trying to become people who felt everything and were moved by nothing that did not deserve to move them. That is the standard, not numbness. Precision. So the next time you are disrespected, and you will be, because the world does not rearrange itself around your growth, here is what you carry into that moment. You carry the awareness that your identity is not on trial. You carry the understanding that their behavior is a confession, not an evaluation. You carry the pause, the deliberate, sovereign pause that separates the event from your response and reminds every conditioned instinct in your body that you are the one who decides what happens next. You carry the silence that is not absence but presence, complete, unshakable, immovable presence. And in that presence, something happens that no clever comeback could ever produce. They run out of material, because everything they brought was designed to provoke a reaction, and you gave them something they were never prepared for. You gave them a person who cannot be reached that way. And that is not something they can argue with. That is not something they can overcome. That is simply a wall. This is the one genius way Stoics destroy disrespect. Not with fire. With stillness. Not with the perfect words. With the refusal to need them. If this is the philosophy you want to build your mind around, subscribe. Not for content, for construction. If you're comfortable being moved by anyone who decides to test you, keep scrolling. But if you're ready to become genuinely unreachable, you already know what to do.